Hello from Austin, Texas. I am so excited that our city is joining forces with the U.S. Chamber Foundation as one of the next Beyond 34 cities. It's one of my priorities as mayor to take real aggressive action on climate change, perhaps the defining issue of our time. And that includes keeping Austin on the leading edge of the zero waste and circularity movement. Every item we bring into our city and consume has an impact on our climate, from how it was produced to how it was transported and ultimately where it ends up. All too often, these items end up in our natural environment, green spaces, or filling up our landfills instead of being recycled or reused so that they can be put to productive use in our economy. We know our ambitious goals for a circular economy here in Austin can't be reached alone. We need the support of our nonprofit partners, businesses who share our values, and other cities who can pass along their own wisdom. We're all ears and we want to learn. That's why we jumped at the chance to be a part of the U.S. Chamber Foundation's exciting work in the Beyond 34 initiative. We've already made great progress on circularity in Austin by setting a goal of reaching 90% diversion from our landfill by 2040. Joining the U.S. Plastics Pact, offering compost collection to all city customers. Pioneering circular entrepreneurship programming like the reverse pitch competition and more. I know that this project will take the efforts to the next level by engaging corporate leaders and connecting us to other visionary cities. Thank you to the U.S. Chamber Foundation for your support of Austin's journey towards circularity. And I welcome the partnership of anyone in the audience as Austin works toward our zero waste and climate neutral future. Enjoy the panel.
What a great way to start. I want to start by really thanking Mayor Adler by painting a picture of what Beyond 34 is about and the partnership that we're going to talk about, where cities work together and learn alongside the U.S. Chamber Foundation about how to build a circular future. Welcome to the panel. We're really glad you've joined us. I am Julie Gerke. I'm the Vice President of Philanthropy for Walmart and the Walmart Foundation, and I am really pleased to be here. We are a proud supporter of Beyond 34, which was started by the Chamber Foundation in 2016, really with a vision of building scalable solutions that can be locally tailored for building a circular economy, and how we can accelerate that work by cities learning from each other, engaging the business community, and really moving as quickly as possible to a circular future. I am excited because we have cities that have already been on their way: Orlando, Florida, Cincinnati, Ohio, and then we have two of our newest city partners joining us and represented today in Austin, Texas, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Today's panelist, I am going to introduce here, which we're going to start with Gina McKinley, who is the Manager of Strategic Initiatives Division at the City of Austin, working with Mayor Adler to really make this real. And Emily Yates, Director of the Smart Cities Program at the City of Philadelphia. Thank you both for being here. I'm excited to learn about what you all have underway. I'm also joined by a fellow supporter of the initiative, John Kalarchek, sorry about that, who's Senior Director of CSR and Waste Reduction at Walgreen Boots Alliance. Thank you all for being here. I'm excited about what I'm going to learn from you all and what you're going to share with us along the way. So to get us started, I think it's important that we learn a little bit about the starting place you're all at. So starting with Gina and then moving to Emily and John, having you wrap us up, can you briefly highlight some of the key actions that your city or company has already started to transition to a circular economy? So Gina, over to you.
Thanks, and I'm happy to be here with the panel today. And I thank you to the foundation for working with Austin. You got a little bit of context from Mayor Adler about some of the things that are happening in Austin, but to set the stage, in 2011, like the mayor said, we did establish our zero waste goal, which is to achieve 90% diversion by the year 2040. Currently, that's been in place for about a decade now. So currently we are taking a look at that plan and doing an update to the plan. So the timing with Beyond 34 was great. We are looking at the plan to make sure the strategies will let us achieve that target by the year 2040, aligning it with our new circularity initiatives that are in our city, as well as our climate equity goals. A couple of examples I'll throw out. We're looking internally at the city organization as a whole. We have a little over 13,000 employees in our city across many buildings and departments, and we have a circular cities pilot where we are looking at our internal practices to make sure we're really practicing what we preach and creating circular practices within the business of our city. We also, like I think he mentioned, joined with the Plastics Pact in 2020 as an activator. So we're looking at specific commodities as well, like plastics, and working with the pact to identify what our national strategy might be around that specific commodity. So those are a couple of examples of things that we're doing in our city, but really happy to be involved here.
Thanks, Gina. Emily, I'd love to hear a little more about what Philadelphia's got going on.
Definitely happy to share, and really echoing Gina's excitement. We're thrilled that the U.S. Chamber Foundation has selected Philadelphia as a city to be part of the Beyond 34 program. So in Philadelphia, I lead the Smart Cities work, which is essentially looking at innovative tech and data and ways to help improve government efficiencies and improve quality of life. So for me, it's really exciting to have circularity situated and housed within that program because the technology will help enable the transition. And some of the programs we've launched already have planted seeds of circularity. So we had a challenge issued to help us achieve our zero waste by 2035 target. And we ended up developing an urban mining tool looking at construction and demolition waste and where it's being created and also where it could be used. So trying to identify where we could create hubs for those valuable resources. We are also partnering with a company called Retriever, which very serendipitously started at the beginning of COVID when everybody was going through their house and cleaning out their closets. Retriever collects in a contactless way textiles and e-waste and then works with companies to upcycle them and maintain their high value. And then we're also partnering with them to get computers to families in need. So they're also collecting computers that we have refurbishers refurbish and provide to address our digital divide work. And we have a food program where we're looking at city procured food and ways that we can create a more circular ecosystem around $25 million worth of procured food, knowing that the market can really impact a transition in that space. So yeah, we have a lot of really great projects happening in Philadelphia.
Thanks, Emily. So John, you've heard a little bit about what a couple of cities have going on, but could you talk a little bit about what Walgreens Boots Alliance has underway?
So certainly a little different perspective coming from the corporate side on things, but I think this opens up, lots of opportunity for us. So our journey really on the waste side of things got started with us obviously looking at hazardous waste and some of the things that we have to do due to regulations, but then it really morphed into more of what about the things that aren't necessarily required by regulation everywhere. So we started our zero waste to landfill journey in our distribution centers maybe about 4 years ago, where we're running at about a 94% diversion rate in our distribution centers. Our corporate campus has recently implemented all of their programs to officially be zero waste to landfill, and that's just started. So I'm looking forward to starting to see some data come out of that. And certainly, the circularity piece is a piece that continues to evolve. And I think we heard from the previous group that spoke, and I know we're going to get into it a little bit today, is really, working with these different communities, you get down to the infrastructure piece and what's possible and who do you work with and how do you do these kinds of things. And I think that's the beauty of Beyond 34, because you have your usual suspects that we talk to all the time and we do a lot of work with, but being able to spend time in the community and work with folks in the local community opens up all kinds of opportunities for us that you don't necessarily really think about. You never really know where that new innovative answer may come from. And I think the opportunity that we get to work with others and try to just do the things we do every day, which is in my area especially, I deal with the very real, piece. It's a tangible something that we have, and I have to deal with it. We have a whole other group upstream that work on things for us to. I always tell them their job is to put me out of business. So, we certainly work and collaborate with them internally. But my area really gets involved in that tangible piece of, we have it now and we have to do something with it because we can't sell it, we can't donate it. So I know we're going to get into that a little bit, but those are some of the main things that my group's been working on. And I'll kick it back over to you.
Thanks, John. I think that sets up really my question for Gina and Emily, which is, you've got a lot going on already. We're hearing, Austin and Philadelphia have really been involved in moving to a circular economy for a while. What is it that you hope to accomplish through the Beyond 34 partnership? Are there specific partnerships or innovations, challenges that you're excited to tackle in this initiative specifically? And Emily, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I don't think there's a specific waste problem that I'm looking to tackle. Probably not the ideal response to this question, but honestly, the big part for me is the opportunities to create jobs and the scale of jobs. So looking for jobs for returning citizens, hard to employ, underskilled. Those kind of jobs are really valuable within the circularity space. So that's a big driver for me, but also creating the opportunity for innovation and economic, and through that addressing the waste. I think the other big thing for us is we have a ton of resources in Philadelphia. And so the ability to really tap into those organizations and the universities that we have to really drive this innovative thought. We have the waste, we have the illegal dumping, we just had a massive tire fire a week ago that was really horrible, and smoke went all the way to South New Jersey. So we have the waste, just we want people to be innovative and come up with really creative ways to use them and maintain their highest value for as long as possible. So yeah, I think it's less about the waste and more about the opportunities that we can create through that waste.
That's great, thank you. Gina, I'd love to hear a little more about your plans in Austin.
Yeah, and following up with Emily, I mean, part of the excitement for me is really being able to learn so closely with another city. So I think going through this process with the city of Philadelphia, where we have, it sounds like both of our cities have made some progress and have some great things in place. Let's just even list on this call. I think the opportunity is there to share ideas, maybe things we've already done, and things we could do together even potentially. But for Austin, I'd say expanding our strategic plan for circularity as a community. We've had a program that's been growing over the years, but within our community, just to give some perspective, in the city of Austin, the city utility, the solid waste utility, really only directly manages about 15% of the material that is generated in the community. And that's material that we're collecting at the curb from primarily single family homes. That leaves about 85% of that community that we don't directly influence. It's managed by the private sector. So we have to look at policies and programs to really influence where that material is flowing. And I think Beyond 34 is another opportunity for us to pull the entire community together, to have those conversations, to look at areas that we maybe haven't tapped, opportunities to kind of standardize circular business practices throughout the community. Our program is a partnership between the solid waste utility and our economic development department. So obviously clearly focused on job growth as well, and social entrepreneurship within our community, and just expanding all of those things. So I think, yeah, the opportunity potential is great, having new conversations and see what comes out of it. The opportunity to go in not knowing specifically what the solutions are going to be or the opportunities is part of the excitement for me.
That's great. So John, Walgreens Boots Alliance has made an investment in Beyond 34. So could you talk a little bit about how you see this as part of your strategy and goal around building circular economy?
Sure. So at Walgreens, everything's about the community, right? We're in communities all over the country. Our 4 pillars of the CSR strategy that we have around healthy communities, healthy planet, sustainable marketplace, healthy and inclusive workplace, they all come together in some way, shape, or form around sustainability, circular economy, waste reduction. I could argue that it could fit in any of those places because it directly impacts something in each of those 4 phases. So for us, it's something that touches the community in a very real way. Solutions that I can think about sitting just outside of Chicago always sound like great ideas when we come up with them, But when you go to the community, sometimes they make a lot of sense. Sometimes they don't make as much sense. I think that direct community involvement, dealing with the people that, live in those communities, that, our customers, the people that work for us, the community is the center of what we do, and being able to talk with people that are on the ground there and trying to figure out, where does their city want to go? What do the residents think about climate change, and about the idea of waste reduction, and about diverting things from landfill. All those things are really, really important. And sitting in Chicago, like I said, it's one thing to come up with ideas, but really working with the people that not only do the work every day in our stores, but working with other industries. Innovation is the key word that I keep hearing. And really, you don't know where that's going to come from. So it's going to be different in different places. The idea that we can take the things that we're trying to do and be a better corporate citizen, and sit down with the communities that we serve, and really, roll up our sleeves and say, what are things that can be done, and maybe even think of some things that maybe the first time we talk about it, we don't think can be done, that eventually you start peeling away, and then you find a way to get some things accomplished. So I think for us, the idea of working with the people in the communities that we serve is the utmost importance in trying to solve some of these things, because I say all the time, we didn't create all the problems we're dealing with on our own, and we're not going to solve them on our own. So that piece of collaboration is key to us, and the people that live there are the best people to collaborate with.
No, it's a great point. And partnerships are so key, whether you're talking about the community, or I heard in the last panel talking about working with suppliers. Even as recently as this morning, Walmart had a sustainable packaging summit with suppliers, thinking about how we can work together on this. At Walmart, we're thinking about circular economy as moving really from this take, make, dispose model to being regenerative and circular in both energy and waste. Limiting our reliance on certain plastics is a huge part of that. We have two global goals really by 2025 that were specific to this. So first is a 15% absolute reduction in global virgin plastic footprint. And then thinking about how we achieve 100% recyclable, reusable, or industrial compostable private brand packaging. So working in our own supply chain upstream, but then to your point, thinking through to the community. With Walmart's, 90% of Americans live within 10 miles of a Walmart. So that community partnership is real. And if we aren't working with communities really to think about how it's recycled and the infrastructure in place in communities around the country, it won't work. And then frankly, with the customer about the behavior change. And so how are we making it easy, whether it's in innovating on plastic bags or labeling, to make choices for consumers who want to really help build a circular economy easy. And thinking throughout that life cycle feels really important to this work. So I'd love to have you all talk both from the city and the corporate perspective about the role of these partnerships. We're talking about public-private partnerships. We're talking about partnerships often with competitors, or really often structured in ways that might not have happened before. So John, why don't we start with you, and then come to the cities to talk about the role of public partnerships. And I'd love tangible examples if people can provide them.
Yes, so in my area, there are no competitors, right? This is a problem that we're all tackling together, and it's the only way we're going to solve them. So I've taken the word competitor out of the vocabulary in my space, and really put in collaborator, an innovator, and willing participants. Some maybe not as willing, but we drag them along with us anyway, to just try to figure out, how do you deal with these types of issues? And, that infrastructure piece and everything that's happened with China Sword, and I'm sure we've been over it many, many times, has made things very complicated in this space. And I think in the previous panel, I heard him talking about infrastructure and the crumbling infrastructure, and, we're being stuck at 34%, recycling rates. All that stuff just continues to be the problem that everybody talks about. And I go to a lot of different meetings, and I see most of the same people at these meetings, and we're talking about these things. I think Beyond 34 and being in the community and working with cities gives us a chance to go away from just talking about these things to really trying things. And I'm very much a roll up your sleeves and try things and do pilots and, see what works, because it's one thing for our our customers to tell us what they think about plastics. Like, plastic's bad. That's typically what you hear. But what happens in the real world when they're faced with a decision between, do I take a plastic water bottle? What if we put water in a glass bottle? What if we put it in an aluminum, can? What actually happens when they are there to make their decision? Do they understand the difference? Do they understand how it all impacts them and impacts their community and impacts the planet? And sometimes I say yes, and sometimes I say no. I don't think they really understand. And it's easy to just stand up and say plastic's bad. And I know we're focusing a little on plastics now, but that's the flavor of the day, particularly in my world, right? So, I think that you have to listen to the customer. You have to find people that are looking at the world the same way you are, or you're never going to solve these kinds of problems. So we work with waste brokers. So we have two main waste brokers that we work with in the stores. We have a few more in our distribution centers, and they also work with a lot of different companies throughout the country to try to figure out where do we go in this space. I saw Waste Management on the previous panel. Certainly we work with them. We work with some smaller waste companies. We work with a lot of different people. So I could probably come up with 50 different examples, and we could talk for another hour on the different things that we've accomplished. But I'm more toward okay, now that we've accomplished some things, what's the next thing? And I think that's that's the beauty of Beyond 34, because there is something next, and there is something that, an Austin or a Philadelphia can offer us that maybe we didn't realize in some of the other cities that we've worked in. So, I think that's the beauty of, continuing to build on it and finding new and exciting people to work with and areas to work with and getting into some of those communities.
Thanks, John. Gina, I want to come to you and hear a little bit about partnerships you might want to highlight.
Sure. And I think partnerships are critical. I mean, I think we're all going to say that we can't do this work unless we're all working together. You guys mentioned making sure that you're working in the communities that your business, the Walmarts and the Walgreens are affixed in. It's really important for us to look to you guys, because you're in the community too. And what we do as cities does have an impact on you also. I think we have to work together. I can highlight one example from Austin. So in developing policy, I talked about the 15 versus 85% and how do we influence material flow in that 85%. And one of our existing policies is called the Universal Recycling Ordinance. And that is a policy that requires a minimum level of diversion for commercial and multifamily properties. So it, runs the gamut from a small food truck to a large hospital, grocery store, et cetera. And so there's a lot to that. And the types of materials coming out of those facilities, the amount, there's a lot of variability. So we took months, really years, having conversations with folks that are impacted by potential requirements that we might impose in terms of reaching our zero waste goal. So that was looking at the people hauling the material, the businesses, the haulers, the processors, the folks who are running the businesses, tenants, property owners, bringing them all to the table to have conversations about what practical solutions might look like in our community. John mentioned a lot of the things that we did. So looking at pilot projects, we worked with business. We're Texas. We have a lot of barbecue in Austin. Working with a local barbecue business to say, can you try out composting for 6 months and then report back? Tell us how it worked for you. What do we need to do differently? So that when we ultimately establish this policy to really move material out of the landfills into a better purpose for the good of the community, we were developing practical policy requirements that ultimately made it successful. And if we had not spent that time to really build those relationships, build those partnership with the larger community, everybody involved, from whoever it's impacting directly, meaning the trash or the recycling that you're taking out every day versus you're processing the material and hauling it, it would not have, in my opinion, it would not have been successful. So that's a process that we like to replicate when we're looking at any new initiative, any new policy. So that's one example of how that has worked in our community.
That's great, Gina, and a good example of kind of a multifaceted partnership at an ecosystem level. Emily, I'd love to hear about an example you have going on in the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah, well, first I want to say, John, thank you for giving me that line about there are no competitors, only collaborators. I'm going to totally, because I agree with it and I haven't worded it so well. So thank you. I think, partnerships are critical because it goes beyond the city's ability to sustain. A lot of people think that cities are these bottomless buckets of money and capacity to just do anything that the city needs. And it's so far from the truth. In Philadelphia, 25% of our population lives at or below federal poverty level. So a lot of our work is going to focus on those individuals and trying to give them opportunities and improve their quality of living. So for us, it's going to be very much a community engagement strategy of how do we ensure that as we are deploying these pilots and these ideas and these policies that we're not further widening that the gap, but really working to close it and provide opportunity and improve their quality of life. So for us, that's going to be a huge way that we tap into partnerships, both with companies like Walmart and Walgreens, but also our universities to really get out there. Our faith-based communities, often a really great resource for doing these kind of projects. And the city itself has to realize what our role can be, which is developing the policy or adjusting the policy to help support these initiatives coming out. How can we further enable? Is it using our public space to deploy reusable collection containers or whatnot, but also our procurement mechanism. I think that's often overlooked, but such a huge opportunity for the city to really impact the market in terms of product and kind of help shift to where it's not a huge cost or a burden on our community to be more circular. And an example, not a procurement of where we've adjusted the policy, is we had a local takeout company here called Tiffin. They wanted on their own initiative to use reusable containers, which is great because we have more styrofoam than we know what to do with in the city. And they were doing it, and then all of a sudden the Department of Health knocked on their door and said, wait, hold up, you guys can't do this, because our process itself had been very bifurcated. So Department of Health wasn't communicating with our licensing and LNI, and LNI issued the permit. Department of Health had no clue. And so we worked with the Department of Health and Tiffin as a city, and we adjusted the policy so it's much easier now for corporations to come and get the permit to use reusables. And so by making that process more smooth and simple, I hope we open the door to other companies really starting to transition to more reusable containers.
That's a
Really,
great.
if I could just add a little
Yeah,
something to what Emily was saying, I think that we're really onto something with the collection piece. And I heard somebody earlier say, try to make it easy. I think all that stuff's really important. But I think the next thing that we really need to crack is the logistics piece of it, right? So we collect it in all these different places. How do we get it aggregated in a place and in a way that the recyclers want it, and that people that can use those materials for the things that they produce? But that's the piece that I think is continuing to confound us just a bit. I think it's probably worse now than it was maybe 2 years ago at this time, just because of some of the supply chain issues and the cost of moving things around and the cost of fuel and things like that. So it feels like it's getting a little more difficult instead of easier. But I think there's that next piece of it is, how do we collaborate together to say, we've all got little bits and pieces of this stuff. How do we get it to an aggregation point where we can really get it into the recyclers' hands in a way and in the quantities that they want?
That's great. And thanks for that. I'm going to do a lightning round on the next question. So, this is just like one tip. So if you were kind of sitting in the shoes of an audience member wanting to get started, what is one tip that you'd have for a city or a brand looking to get started? And John, I'm going to start with you since you just jumped in, and we'll go to Jenna and then Emily.
Sure. I think my tip would be, don't close your eyes to opportunities. I think that, again, we hyper-focus on the people that we work with all the time, but sometimes the answer is in a place where you would never really think about looking, I guess. So getting involved in community projects like Beyond 34, I think, is a great way to bring, retail, and you're bringing in, Marriott hotels, and you're bringing all these different people that maybe don't work together on a daily basis, but when you bring them together, they can find innovative ways of dealing with hard to deal with stuff.
That's a great point. Gina, over to you.
I'd say, I always say data. Start with your data. What's being generated, how much, by who, where's it flowing? Look at that. What's your level of influence, and kind of start there, and then follow that up with learning from others. I think this is a good example, Beyond 34. We'll get to hear pretty intimately, I think, what's happening in Philadelphia, the previous cities who have been involved in Beyond 34, and just that sharing, looking at strategies that have worked elsewhere and localizing it, but data.
That's great. Emily, over to you.
So Gina stole mine. Data is critical. You can't go anywhere without knowing what you're trying to fix, but be persistent. and find your champion. And, you know, don't be afraid to just constantly talk about it and sound like a broken record, but you just got to find the right door and move it through there. You're going to encounter a lot of people who don't understand the importance of this and the relevance of it, but somebody will, and that's who you want to connect with.
Those are great tips. I would just add, be pragmatic, use your sphere of influence. We're always trying to make it simple for our suppliers to get started. And I think the more you can do that, the better. I want to give a quick plug. So if you're one of those cities or regions thinking about how to get started, the Chamber Foundation will be picking 3 additional cities or regions next year. You can join the work. They're accepting applications through Q1 of 2022. And even if you're just wanting to learn a little bit more, to get involved, maybe not be all in, but learn a little bit, we'd encourage you to visit beyond34.org or get in touch with Peter, who is going to be putting his information in the chat for you right now. We really want everybody engaged and involved, and are so grateful. I just want to extend my thanks to the panelists for joining us today. I think each of you offered a good vision for communities to start thinking about and be inspired by. And John, I look forward to continuing to work together as we as retailers try to get this accomplished. So thank you all for today.
Thank you.
Thanks.